What's your name? I've seen you all around. So, where did you live when you were on campus? When you were in what dorms or house did you live in? Graham. TPT house. And then Cleveland. Okay. Was Cleveland open for when you graduated? They didn't close our senior year, did they? No. No. So it was still open. Yeah. Because I was just trying to figure out when I lived in Greer. So I was in Fulton first, but immediately went over to Cleveland. And then I think I was there 2 years and then Greer. So Greer my junior year. That would make sense, wouldn't it?
I think so.
No. Just a question, we're talking up here about where you lived, okay, when you're on campus. And I was in Graham for a semester, but then upper class and took him over to Cleveland, but I think I was there 2 years and then Greer. I know they closed, I'm 75 graduate. Help me out here. When did they close Greer for women and open Greer for men? Do you remember?
I didn't know they ever did. I think you were the only one.
Okay, well, here's a question then to you, okay, because we saw the two speakers that went down to WMCR,
Yes.
you know that. And they were very graceful. They were a couple, and they did not streak. They actually, I had that corner room in Greer, and Julie was up there too. And they were announced that they were going to come, and they walked down to where Michael is, that little place, in front of the Stockdale Center.
Right.
And they just rolled slowly, and not, not in a hurry, not slowly, but anyway, and then just walked down there. I'm trying to figure out when was it I in Greer. And so what year was the streaking?
It was the spring of '74.
So it's okay, it was my junior year. I was there my junior year. Okay, makes sense.
But you said they were streaking on this campus? When did you dream about that?
Stop. I saw it.
Did you? Okay,
I did
there are
see it.
witnesses.
Yeah.
I have a witness.
Out of McMichael.
Okay, well, good sis. I witnessed it too.
Again, there are more people in the room. We haven't yet started the starting time, but to my right, your left, if you need a restroom, there are two restrooms down that hall, and they're immediately to your right. Do you have your microphone? No, but they're all set. Why don't you grab one?
Yeah, we're just going to run this.
Of course. Spiritual. What, you're a streaker? You did it? Really?
On a dare.
You did it.
But decided Marshall.
Let's go down the hall.
Yeah. Oh, he calls around for office.
Yeah, I'm not ready for anything.
Hello, fellow fighting Scots. How are you guys doing today?
Wonderful.
Woo! Good. I'm glad you guys are having a good time. Thank you for coming and joining us today. I'm gonna not
Take
do
it
an
2 inches
introduction.
closer. 2 inches closer.
Okay.
That's wonderful.
I'm not gonna do a formal introduction, so thank you guys for attending.
Thank you all. We appreciate all you and staff have done for us this weekend. My name is Julie Paulson. I am a moderator. My husband Pete Paulson. Seen almost everybody around here today. Alice Dunlap is in the back, and Bill Merschel is over on the side here. And we have been collaborating for several months by Zoom to try to figure out what we want to do here. So the idea is just for us to relax and have fun and share stories, okay? So Bill and Alice have mics, just like I do. And you may think that you have a loud voice, or you may have a leftover teacher voice, and we know those are loud. But we have a bunch of old ears in here. So we're kind of gonna insist that we use the mic, and so wait for one of our roving mics to come get you, okay? Does that make sense? Okay, you've got some handouts here, and I'm gonna kind of talk us through that, and then we'll get going, okay? Welcome. The premise of this roundtable is that Monmouth mattered to us. Its purpose is to give us an opportunity to reflect together on the last 45 to 60 years since we graduated from Monmouth and share with each other how it made a difference in our lives, however small or large, in the past, and how you expect that might carry through into your future. And that's an important word, because we all have a lot of history behind us, but hopefully we also have some good future time ahead of us, and we have to decide how we're going to use that. So we're looking at that today, okay? What is something in your experience at Monmouth from which you can trace a line to a choice, a decision, or an experience in your life? And how does it continue to influence you in the direction you are moving now? Examples might be, these could be big or small, okay? Examples might be words from a professor that you've never forgotten, friendships that continue to enrich your life, choices you made based on an aha moment at Monmouth, ways that your major has helped you that you didn't anticipate, ways that a required course that you didn't think you wanted to take has helped you in ways you didn't realize. We have 2 roving microphones. Please use them to help others hear you easily. Alice or Bill will come around to anyone who indicates that they'd like to contribute. We have only an hour, so we ask that you give us the short version, 3 or 4 minutes, so that we all have the opportunity to hear more reflections about Monmouth's impact. So, I get to be first.
All right.
When I came to Monmouth, I had checked to be sure that they had a pre-veterinary program in their biology department, because I had been dedicated to becoming a veterinarian to the point where I had gone in Peoria, where I'm from, had gone to look for like an internship that they kind of required to get into vet school at different veterinary offices. None were open, so I ended up working the summer at a kennel, breeding kennel for German Shepherds for 50 cents an hour. But I got that experience. So I was dedicated to becoming a veterinarian. And that continued until I met this guy here. And we took all our classes together because we were both biology majors and both in the same year. So almost all of our classes we took together. And we really liked that. We liked studying together. We liked working together. Our senior year, we were split up because I was doing teaching, student teaching. And we found out we really didn't like that so much, being apart. So we wanted to do something together. And so veterinary school, veterinary medicine came into play again, okay, and kind of this back shelf, now it's back in the front, and dental school, okay? So we went to, we did the testing that you need to do, and then we were invited for interviews, and we went for an interview at U of I Veterinary School. And they weren't really nice there during the interview. Found out later it's what they call a stress interview. And having come from the tradition of Monmouth, you know, we really didn't have stress interviews here. We kind of got, you know, let's do what it takes in order to get you where you want to go. That was the tradition here. So, you know, it went okay, but not great. I was kind of upset because, you know, I had really come here with that in mind. So came back, Dr. Bowman, who was our senior advisor, wanted to know how it went. And I described some of the questions they asked, like, your dad's a chemist, why don't you want to go into chemistry? And, you know, other things like that, and I just, okay. And finally they asked me, well, why would you want to do veterinary medicine? Or why would you want to do dentistry if you can do veterinary medicine? And I said I really didn't have a good answer for him. And Dr. Bowman just stood there, he looked at me, and he said, well, you could have said, because I'd rather look in the horse's mouth than the horse's ass. And if you know Dr. Bowman, you know that is quintessential Dr. Bowman. So that's my story.
All right, we open it up then to the rest of you. As said, you know, words from a professor, friendships, choices you made based on an aha moment that you got here, ways that your major helped you that you did not anticipate. But we're looking at then, now, obviously, your lives now or have had jobs, professions. Think back to Monmouth. How has that affected you now, or how is it going to affect you in the future? So it's your turn.
Who's got, here we go.
All right, yes, can I see your name again? Deborah.
Debbie, yeah.
Debbie.
This is Deborah Sumner.
Okay, well, I grew up in Monmouth, so, you know, my whole life until I got married. But I was a social major and an education minor. And I had a social teacher, and of course the Vietnam War was going on, which was, you know, really painful for most of us. And we're sitting there and we're like, we'd never do that. We'd never get caught up in the riots, you know. And he says, okay, books down, stand up, make a circle. We did, and he says, just say what I say. And he goes, revolution. Well, by the time about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, we're yelling it. And because he would emphasize like revolution, things like that. And he says, but you said you never get caught up in it. Do you see how people can suck you in? And the lesson was, I've never said I would never do that. I would never get caught up in it. Because you will. You know, someone can lead you in. And it's something, as a teacher, I try to make sure my students learn that don't say you won't do that, you might someday. Think first. Think before you get in. You know, I mean, don't be on the sidelines of a fight. Walk away. So, you know, I've never forgotten that.
Debbie, that's tremendous. I've never heard that story.
Of all the school that I've done, through masters, everything, that day was probably the most impactful day I ever had in a classroom.
That's tremendous. Thank you for that. Like I said, I've never heard that before. Thanks for sharing. Who's next?
Yes, Bill.
Bill.
Bill Hyatt.
My gosh.
Microphone for Bill.
Alice is
I
coming.
want an Alice. I want an Alice microphone.
Okay, that's right.
Well, I had class of 75, and I was, like the Polsons, came to be a biology major until I discovered that first year chemistry and I were not compatible. And I flunked the first term, and the professor said if I could raise my grade to a C the second term, he would allow me to go back and take the first term over. And I sweated, I studied, I shook my angry fist at God, why are you shutting this door to me? But it became evident I didn't get the logic of chemistry. And my advisor, John Federer, said, well, what else are you passionate about? I said, well, I really want to make a difference in the environment. So, well, you can create your own major. So with his guidance, I created a topical major of environmental management. And I was really excited about it. I went on to apply to the University of Indiana University in their degree program, but a week before I graduated, I got a letter from the dean at IU saying, Mr. Pyatt, we have a file but nothing in it. And in a week, we make our decision for the new class. You need to send me your material. So I ran around campus and got letters of reference in again, and Dr. Bowman sent my resume. A week after graduation, I got another letter from Indiana University. Well, Mr. Pyatt, I regret to inform you that while we did find your file eventually, it was this file, you won't get in the fall semester. And so instead of having a summer job, I needed to have a year-round job. Went to the flour mill in Alton, where I went to high school, and the HR guy said, oh, I see you started as a biology major. You've had chemistry, haven't you? And I said, yes, I did. And I became one of the quality control chemists on the night shift at the flour mill, where you test humidity and protein. And after about 6 months, the mill manager, who was a family friend, said, you know, Bill, you're really not much of a chemist. But you might make a mill manager. So would you be willing to take training at 7 different places in the mill, and then go to Buffalo, New York, and learn how to become a miller to make wheat into flour. So I did the stations, and a week before the big blizzard in upstate New York in '77, someone in the previous department got ill, and I was going to have to hold over in Alton, and couldn't take my rotation in Buffalo, New York. So missed the great blizzard of '77 in Buffalo, New York. And during that winter period when I'm hanging over in Alton, I felt a call to ministry. And decided I'd go back to the mill manager and said I'd like to have a leave of absence so I could explore ministry. He goes, well, Bill, I'll give you a leave of absence, but I don't think you're coming back. And I ended up becoming a Methodist pastor, so 48 years. And so what I discovered was you run into a closed door, and you got to figure out how to pivot. And you use the assets that you have, and you adapt. And I felt like the time I spent in Monmouth really prepared me for it. When you hit a closed door, you pivot. You learn to adapt. And then you make sure you got a lot of corny stories. That you have.
Thank you so much, Bill.
Methodist ministers have a lot of corny stories.
We specialize in it.
Wonderful. All right, that's great. Thank you very much. Great start again. Who's next? This is your forum. Yes, Tom? We need a microphone for Tom.
Here you go, Mr. Tom.
It's on.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. I came here, and on Sunday, I drove down to church on 2nd Street, and I did my thing like I've been doing since I was in the 4th grade, put on my robes and helped out at the altar. And lo and behold, priest only came twice a month. And the guy who was filling in, when he wasn't here, lived in the yellow house across from Cleveland and Leland. And he was a executive at Pottery. He didn't want to do it anymore.
No.
So the priest and him, and I expect that Dorothy Donald, got with steel and weeks. And the next thing I knew, I was getting my religion credit, studying. Still, I could be a lay minister and I could do the services on the Sundays the priest came in, which was twice a month. And which I did my junior and senior year. And I kept on doing that for 60 years. Last time I moved, I told the priest, I'm retired. But I got more out of it than just that. Because Max, who I replaced, got elected to the Carl Sandburg Junior College Board of Trustees when they created in 1967. And my phone rang. Hello, Tom, this is Max. You want a job? And so I was founding history faculty at Carl Sandburg. And I also got to teach government. And by the time I left, I had taught government, education, geography, law enforcement, first aid and CPR, and swimming.
Wow. Kind of liberal arts.
Yeah. Sounds like. I had a dean that told, he was the youngest colonel in the Marine Corps in World War II, and he said to me, Tom, don't tell me why you can't do it, tell me how you're gonna get it done.
There you go.
And I took that the rest of my career.
That's great.
Thank you.
We're gonna move right along. Who's next? Great. Thank you, Tom.
I'll bet Pete June has a story. Come on, Pete.
Like, so-
Just keep it to 5 minutes or less.
So-
Okay, we'll do it then.
Okay.
Hi, I'm David Bickler, class of 65, and I was a chemistry major, and I was planning to go to law school, be a patent attorney. And some of the connections that occurred to me, I was also a member, occurred here for me, I was a SIGAP, I sang in the choir, and I sang on the swim team in basketball. And when I got to, after I was accepted to 3 law schools, Georgetown, George Washington University, and University of Virginia.
Yeah.
And so I asked my chemistry professor, asked, well, what are you going to do? And I told him I was going to go to one of these 3 law schools. And I'm thinking of the 2 that were in Washington, D.C., because they were closer to the patent office. He said, you're crazy. Yeah, if you got into Virginia, go to Virginia, which I did. So that was good advice then. And after I completed that, I was working in Hartford, Connecticut, and I called Dick Anderson, who was in graduate school at Yale, he was in divinity and in music, he was a voice major. And I called him and said, look, Dick, who would you recommend for a voice teacher in Hartford? Well, I found out who that was, from Dick. Took voice lessons from this fellow who came up from New York one day a week, he's rather elderly, and studied voice for probably 10 years with this fellow, and I then sang in the professional chorus of the Connecticut Opera, and Hartford tenor soloist in 2 or 3 different church choirs. All because Dick knew he knew folks that I should talk to get this sort of thing done. So you don't have, you can be a chemistry major and you can succeed doing other things also. That's what, so like you.
I'm hearing this more and more, which I love. I have to just interject this about just the Monmouth community. You know, I heard this from the president, and just we have the capacity to get knowledge from a number of different places, but I've heard, for example, that if somebody wanted to take a course, you know, if you were at a major university, there was no way if you had a biology thing, and you wanted to do something, say music. I know that's not exactly what you did there, but you could go over to the music department here on this campus and find that you could plug in, find somebody that would help you, you know, in that field. You know, the opportunities were just amazing. I want to hear more stories. Pete.
Pete June, class of 74. I'm here with my wife, Janet Compton June, who's class of 75, kind of, sort of, It would have been 76, but she graduated in 3 years. Life-changing story. Janet and I were supposed to have a blind date. I was a member of Sigma Phi Epsilon, and her brother Brad was a year ahead of me, and Janet was supposed to come down one weekend to visit her senior year in high school. He asked me if I'd take her on a blind date. I said, sure. The day came, a friend of mine called me and said his girlfriend was stranded up in Rock Island coming down from Ripon College because of a snowstorm. Could I go get her? So I asked Brad to use his car. He said, sure. What about my sister? Oh, sorry. So we never met. 2 years later, every year, right at the beginning of school year.
Not 2 years, the next year.
The next
That
year,
same
okay.
year. I'm the senior.
The next year, yes.
That fall.
I'll let my wife finish the story. Whatever the hell it was, I see her walking on campus, and she looks sort of cute. And I called out to her a couple of times, and she ignored me, because she had no idea who it was. Anyway, SIGEPs, and I was told they still do this, have what's called the freshman women's tea. It was basically a semi-formal where we invited all the freshman women to come to the house before they met anyone else on campus. And it was a ruse because we had the president there, the department chairs, a number of faculty members we would invite, and it was a high tea. It was sterling silvers and everything else. And all the faculty they excuse themselves over a period of time. I was a social chairman that year. I was in charge of the party that is going to be starting very soon up on the second floor. So I had to go get all the ingredients for the Wapatui punch that had whatever Saga had as the fruit drink of the day and every alcohol I could get from Coles. So I saw her sitting there, we talked a little bit, I introduced myself. I said, Janet, just sit there, I'm the social chairman, please, don't go, stay there. And they'll go upstairs like, so I went and got all this stuff and was back in about an hour, and she stayed there. That night, after the party, we went down on the corner of the SIGEP house overlooking the football field and sat there for over 3 hours talking. In fact, we went back there with Marshall and Joe Svoboda today so they could take pictures of the two of us together where it all started. And it has now been 50 years, well, 52 years since then, but it will be 50 years of marriage this August. That is a life-changing event.
Thank you so much, Pete. Who's next? I want to hear from you. This is your forum. I'm loving this because I'm getting to hear from people I did not know back then. I hung around a lot with her, so I didn't get out very much, which was great. But,
How many folks in here are Monmouth burglars? In other words, how many of us met our spouses on campus? Yeah, I think there's a lot of life-changing events right there, folks. It's true for me too. I'll tell a quick story just to keep things going. I'm Bill Marshall. I came here, I had an incredible biology teacher when I was in high school up in Woodstock, Illinois. And I came here thinking that I wanted to go in pre-med. In fact, Julie, you two guys, I met you very quickly because you're bio majors, same with Bill Pyatt. And what happened to me was I got through the bio courses just fine, but with me it was physics and organic chemistry that were kind of the challenge courses for me. And it became somewhat apparent to me that I should probably pivot a little bit. And so at the same time I was struggling with chemistry and calculus, I was doing a lot of extracurriculars, which I think at a campus of 1,000 students, you can. You don't have to be a journalism major to be the sports editor of the Monmouth Oracle. You don't have to be a broadcast major to have a slot on WMCR. And the fraternity for me, Sigma Phi Epsilon, gave me the opportunity to really develop my PR skills. We did a lot of events back in those days. So when I graduated, I did not go to med school. I went on to grad school at Northwestern. But I have been in corporate communications and retired now for 40 years. But that was a big pivot. I came here as a science major, but my entire life has been around communications. And I thank Monmouth for that. And I think the liberal arts approach, faculty members, I had Dean G for speech, and Chuck Meliska for psychobio, and Stafford Weeks for intro to Christian thought. But it was a lot of the extracurricular things that I could do here that I would have never been able to do at U of I, or even, we'll name another big Illinois university. So that's my story.
That's great. Thank you, Bill.
Commercial.
Who raised their hand?
Janet.
Janet.
She's gonna correct my story.
I like that.
Hi, Janet Condon Jr. Stand up. I'm a little nervous.
You're fine.
So I came here, I had a music major here, and in voice. And when I was growing up, my mom was would play the piano, and she got us all involved in music. And I started piano at 3rd grade and the clarinet at 4th grade. And so I was, quite involved in a lot of music. High school, then switched over to choir because we were splitting. We didn't have enough funds to build a new school, so we had to go half-time. So I had to choose. I couldn't be in the band and the choir. So I chose choir. Always loved to sing. Came here and got involved with the choir here, and became a member of the Sound of Five. Kristen, we were roommates one year. And when my mom saw my piano teacher and told her that I was going to be a music major, her jaw about went to the floor because I was never really excelled greatly at piano. And I could play some, but obviously I had to play to get out of here. But I kind of crushed me, I felt like I wasn't good enough, and I would tell people, well, I went to a really small school, feeling like if I had gone to a big school, probably I could have never made it. And I have to say that, in Dick Rivers' classroom, there were like 5 of us. We would sit, on a little line and have our little class, and I learned so much because of that being so small and being so personal. Well, I ended up, after my student teaching, I did my student teaching after we were married. I graduated 3 years. I didn't care for it at all. Started studying in English and ended up going back to school, getting my elementary ed. And throughout my life, I taught 30 years, K through 8, or 3rd through 8. And, but I've never stopped music. I was in a choir constantly, and I was doing some guest conducting and so forth. Flash forward to 11 and a half years ago, my husband and I moved to a retirement community in Peoria, Arizona. Very active, and we got gradually involved with the theater group, and I started singing in some shows, was gradually brought in by the music director to help her with helping the choir and everything. She left the community, so then I took over. So I have for now the last, 7, 8 years been the music person for the theater group and holding music. All the people in my living room, we have a big wide open space and people bring their chairs, and it's been quite rewarding. I don't think that had I not had my experience here, I would have never have gone this way. I would know ever. I would probably, I don't think so. But It's been a blessing. I love our life out there, and now I also had a lead role in a couple of musicals where I now had to memorize lines and sing on stage and so forth. But it's been quite a life, and we're still going.
I love that. Just exactly what we're talking about, the then, you were here, and you were battling things, but you're teaching. You taught for, you said 30 years?
30 years.
30 years, third through eighth, did you say?
Yes.
And then you're now doing the theater.
Now I'm
Now you're
doing
both involved?
Oh yeah, he's the president of the
You're the
theater
president
group.
of it.
He's writing shows too.
I've written a couple of shows and directed a couple of shows. I've written a couple of shows with one of the other members out there. When we first moved in, I signed up a thing saying, I'm interested in theater. He called me and said, hey, do you know anything about costume? I said, I don't know anything about that. He said, let's talk. Well, then he and I worked on one show that Janet sang in, and then he said he was going to write a show for Janet, because she sang yesterday in the musical review. Several years later, he and I sat down and wrote that show, which was it was called Trilogy Uncensored, What Really Goes On Behind Those Gates. And she had a song in that, but it was a great experience doing that. And like she said, it's the background here that gives you the experience to go forward and do those things.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Steve. Thank you, I see some people eyes in the back here. My dad was a minister. He tried to do everything to get people up front, right? Bill, right?
Yeah.
Matter of fact, a little joke. All right, there was a man at church, and he was sitting right here in front. He was the only one. Everybody else was sitting way in the back. And the minister couldn't figure out why, but he was pleased as punch to have somebody sitting right up front listening to him. And finally, of course, as ministers do at the end of the service, back at the church, he's shaking hands with everybody. Of course, he was front row, he was the last man out. And the minister, greeted him, thank you for coming, got his name, and he said, I just have to ask you, you're sitting in the front, front row, front pew. Can I ask you, what do you do for a living? And this man said, well, I'm a bus driver, and I wanted to see what you do to get people to move in the back. So, we need somebody, Bill, we need somebody from the back row. I see some droopy eyes. Somebody's got to speak. I just saw you walk in. You were very familiar with Brian. I just had to say hi to him on the spot. Back there, somebody get right back there.
All right, I was told to start off here. My name is Gordon Yoakum. I'm a class of 1973, graduate at ZBT. And this has to do with probably one of the most important, administrators at the school here. Her name was Dr. Jean Liebman.
Yes.
We used to call her Jean.
Yep.
And she actually kept me from quitting school for a year. I came from the Philadelphia area with, big suburban schools and all that. And I was probably only about a C or C plus student in high school. And the guidance counselor said, you ought to be thinking about trade schools. And my mom and dad said, nothing doing, we're going to take you to a real guidance counselor in New York City. And said there's this place called the ACM. I didn't know what that was. But I had applied to schools in the East Coast, couldn't get in. This was during the Vietnam draft. Everybody's going to college to get out of the draft. So I couldn't get into any of the East Coast schools that I applied to. So he suggested I start applying out to the Midwest. Monmouth was one of the schools that accepted me. And so I came out here sight unseen. I'd never seen the place, but I loved the brochure. Beautiful brochure. My dad and mom dropped me off, beautiful campus. But here I am with C pluses in school, and I didn't think I was going to make it one semester here. I was convinced I wasn't going to do it. So I tried to study. And probably right after finals, the first trimester, I called Dean Jean and I said, I can't do this. I gotta I got dropped, I gotta call this quits. She looked at me funny and she says, literally, what the hell's the matter with you? The grades are in, you got a 3.7. And I looked at her and I said, you gotta be kidding me. And she said, you are so down on yourself that you didn't realize how well you were really doing. And she was scolding me about that. And then I think after that I woke up and I said, I'm really glad I came to a small, more intimate college where somebody paid attention to the student and what was going on outside the academics and more on the emotional side. So I owe her a whole heck of a lot.
That's great. That's wonderful. That's great. Oh, the dean, or the president.
President.
Please, someone with a microphone?
Sorry, come on, Mersh, get up.
Yes.
I think you know, I'm not an alum, I married an alum. Jeff and I started dating in graduate school at University of Illinois after I was there a semester. Jeff was living with 3 alumni from Monmouth who were all graduate assistants in physical education with the football team at U of I, but all Monmouth grads. So they were in their second year, Jeff was. So I went over to their apartment one day to meet with Jeff. His good friend, Dean Kress, who was a longtime football coach at Hope College, and a really good lifelong friend of Jeff's, was sitting there. I was waiting for Jeff, who was getting ready or coming back from class or something. And Dean had a book out about motivational theory, right? He was studying coaching. And he's like, you're gonna help me. I'm like, dude, I don't even know you. Dean probably weighed 320, 5% body fat maybe, you know, built, no thing. He said, well, you're gonna help me learn this, because at Monmouth, we're lifelong learners, and you're gonna help. So I was like, well, how are you gonna motivate me? And I was sitting next to him on his couch, and he put his very large leg on top of me, and he said, that will be physical motivation because you can't move. So that was my introduction to Monmouth College. We love to learn, and we love to join along. And then luckily Jeff came out. But an hour later, I was still learning motivation.
Thank you so much. All right, keep it going. Let's hear for you. You've got a few more minutes. We've got 20 minutes. Let's hear anybody but in the back, way in the back. Jerry, you've got to say something. Why don't you give Jerry the microphone? Yeah. He's just been around the world, so he told me that. Say something cool. No? All right.
Okay, John.
All right, we're moving on.
I'm John Welsh, class of '78. Probably the most impactful professor I had in my entire 4 years was Dr. William Hastings.
Oh,
I remember Wild Bill roaming the lecture hall in the Alderman Thiessen Science Center, talking about, I mean, he would just kind of rave sometimes, and he got on this rant about the presence of a tie and the presence of a phallus, and you know, every time, you know, people see a tie, they always associate it with men, and he, if you recall, he always wore like a weird flannel tie. He never wore like silk ties, so they always kind of blended in with his sport coat and his shirt, and it was like, wow. When he said he had a tie on for the first time, I was like, I guess he does have a tie on. I never really saw that, but what he said that really made the most impact to me, and my wife and I talk about this all the time. So, you know, the presence of a tie and the presence of phallus, correlation does not mean causation.
Okay.
He said, if you don't remember anything from this class, remember correlation does not mean causation. So I have applied that rule many times in my life, and it was probably, like I said, the most impactful thing I got out of my 4 years in academics. So
That vision. That's good. I love that. Correlation is not causation. That's great. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Rawls Art class of '73, and there are so many things that every so often there's something little that stays in your mind as you go through life. And I was at ZBT. I was Rush chairman, and we were known as, we had a reputation of the fraternity that behaved itself. Rush would be difficult because, you know, the students want to party. A, B, our house was farthest away from the center of campus. So, you know, trying to do that. Well, one evening, we decided to have a, you know, have one of the sororities over and have a keg, you know, just sort of a social. And we got a little bit too much beer. We ordered too much. And so everybody's going home. We've got a keg and a half left. What are we going to do? Well, we pick up the phone, call down the street, Theta Chi's. Hey guys, we got a little bit too much beer. Y'all want to come help us drink it? There's a rumble coming up the street, and all. And we had a great time. The next day, I was doing something. I was in Dean Dan Baring's office, and he said, "I understand you had some folks over last night." I said, "Yeah, we had a little bit of stuff." He said, "Well, just be careful." Well, I told Andy, who was our chapter president, and by the end of the day, the whole campus heard we'd been formally reprimanded, and Rush picked up.
And without any social media posts.
That was where I learned the art of the spin.
Hi there, this is Eddie Kerr, with the butter. Also class of 73, also ZBT, the chapter president in question. All I said to people was that Ross had been hauled into the dean's office about a drinking event the night before. And then that snowballed. But as long as I have the microphone, and not being one who likes the limelight, having been president of the Student Center Board and other things, the initial president of Psi-Chi here on campus, speaking of Wild Bill Hastings, my favorite professor here was Dean Wright.
Yes.
He was my advisor. He was fabulous. But I was a psychology major, and I was thinking my senior year what it was going to be like to spend my career running white rats through a maze. And that wasn't very, it had lost its allure. But my fraternity brothers were all business majors, so I thought, well, maybe I can get a minor. And so I started taking classes with them. And I have used, and I went on into international banking, into technology management and healthcare, and then ultimately as the CFO of an independent prep school. In every one of those jobs, psychology was critical.
Excellent.
And I got that.
Love that. Thank you, Andy. Sheet here. One more roving mics to go. Before you, I'll get you the next speaker. We want the roving mics to go around to every person that's being taped, so we want to get who was here. So we want your name as the roving mic comes by, and in 3 words or less, can you tell us your current, can you read that for me?
What skill you learned at Monmouth that helped you in your career or life?
Skill.
Skill.
Yeah, okay, I'll read it again. In 3 words or less, can you tell current students what skill you learned at Monmouth that helped you in your career or life? What skill you learned at Monmouth? What's that? Okay, here we go. Let's try that. That was, if you want to start at the back row, maybe, and president. In 3 words or less, the president gave me this. So we want to know, in 3 words or less, can you tell the current students what skill you learned at Monmouth that helped you in your career or life? So this is helping the president. We want to entice other students to come here, okay? So,
Are we doing this verbally or written?
on the microphone, you gotta go around the room, all right? Get up and,
On this side?
yeah, sure, just go down the road. We're gonna do everyone.
Okay.
Just your name, yeah, in 3 words or less. What skill you learned at Monmouth. That's hard.
Camaraderie.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I'm Barry McNamara, son of English professor Jerry McNamara.
Hello, I'm Jerry Pickett, and my word is compromise.
Thank you, Jeremy.
I'm Judy Oakfeld. I'm trying to think of 3 words here on the spot. Can you hold the microphone closer?
Right close to your mouth.
A little closer.
Friendship, cooperation, and curiosity.
Friendship, cooperation, and curiosity. Gotta hold the mic real close to your mouth.
Okay, Barb Clement Alexie, importance of education.
Excellent, thank you.
Kathleen Clark Kimmel, class of 78. Leadership, multitasking, and stick-to-itiveness.
Excellent, thank you.
Wendy Johansson, class of 78. Friendship and listening.
That's great, thank you. Bill?
Bill Alexie, class of 75.
Bill, you put it right up your mouth. Put that right up your
Class
mouth.
of 75 or 77. This will be different. I learned safe driving skills.
That's right. That's right. I know you were a driver.
Brian Kimmel, class of 76, leadership and critical thinking.
Excellent. Okay.
Hey, Wendell. You're right.
Little Shaman, like confidence, versatility, be ready to move, go.
That's it. That's great. Thank you very much. This is great. Thank you.
John Hall, class of 78, working with people.
Oh, I like that. That's great.
James Schroeder, class of 78, diligence.
George Youngman, class of 73, creative thinking.
Andy Kerr, class of 73, public speaking.
Nick Tucker, class of 73, listening, patience, and persistence.
John Dahl, class of 1975, leadership and presence and adaptability.
Ross Hart, 73, business analysis.
Rick Johnson, and I'm in class of 1976. I met my best friend. My wife.
Margaret Butler Johnson, class of 75, I would say friendships, leadership, and networking.
Kristen Lees, graduate of 75, take advantage of opportunities.
Bill Pyatt, class of 75, assess, adapt, and be persistent.
Janet Condon June, 75, love of learning.
Pete June, 74, communicating with others.
Rick Kaufman, class of 65, as treasurer for 2 years of SIGHAP, responsible money management.
Greg Pemberton, class of 75. Hard work, but have fun. And if you want the 5-minute version of that story, I'll be
Okay. That's good.
Judy Maxwell Schaefer, listening and reaching out to others.
Lee Schaefer, class 75, I can't count, so I would tell all the future students that the job that you end up with hasn't been invented yet.
Yeah.
That's true.
Debbie Sumner, class of 70, teamwork and flexibility.
Judy Guy Casey, class of 78, research, organization, and writing.
Candace Lovett, class of 78, medical science, encouragement, and pivoting.
Suzanne Lacey Bennett, class of 75, embracing different ideas.
David Bicklin, class of 65, fairness, equity, and justice.
Tom Resner, class of 64. I learned how to do homework. I never did it in high school.
Yeah.
Good. You had to here.
And I learned how to participate. I mean, you all participate in something somewhere along the line, but I learned to get involved, and that's what you get to do at Monmouth. Lots of work is aid.
That's great, thank you.
Vicki Louder Young, class of 1974, statistical analysis and experimental design.
Ted Briscoe, class of 73, interdisciplinary learning.
Cool. Anyone else? Anyone else? The three words. Mine is listen, listen, listen way more than you talk.
And I would say concise writing and leadership.
That's good.
And I guess I would say confidence, sociability, and integrity.
Bill?
I would say the importance of communication and how to influence organizations.
Excellent. Thank you. I'll tell you what, this has been a tremendous time. We're going to let class out early.
All right.
Okay? So enjoy your last 5 minutes. Any last words? Alice, any last words? No?
No,
Okay,
class
any
is
last
getting out
words, Bill?
early.
Well, the only thing that I would say is that these conversations don't have to stop now. We still have a dinner ahead of us. So this may just prime the pump to take you into deeper conversations at dinner tonight.
Great. We're going to catch you 5 minutes later, okay? All right. Thank you all for coming. Round of applause.
Thank you guys all for coming. This was a really nice session. Our next session is going to be AI in higher education at the Moot Boardroom in the Center for Science and Business, starting at room 276, and that starts at 4:15. There will be carts downstairs.
Thank you so much.